Coogs House. The Houston Cougars face an opponent this weekend that's had a, let's say, disappointing season, and it might have just gotten more disappointing. Does that mean what I think it means?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that can't step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation, but I don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what your fast food restaurant of choice is. I don't know. You've got one. Everyone's got one. Whatever your guilty pleasure or fast food of choice, if it's not so guilty, is, tell us in the comments down below. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And we'll have more on that later, but a lot to get into. I want to talk some about some hinting at basketball news, potentially at the back portion of the episode. I want to talk some about Houston's offensive coordinator and some of the things going on there as I see them. And first and foremost, we're talking about coordinators. We got to talk some about what's happening in Utah because Houston plays Utah this week, and the game got announced for 6 p.m. local time. That's good. I kind of thought it was going to be like a day game, morning game even. I would not have expected Houston to get the night call in that one. And Houston's playing Utah, and Utah has had a spiralingly bad year. Very much a welcome to the Big 12 kind of moment for a team that thought that they needed a red carpet kind of welcome. Utah has quarterback problems. Cam Rising's been injured, stuff like that. But the big news for them the last 24 hours recording this podcast is that their offensive coordinator, Coach Ludwig, stepped down. He resigned. I've got thoughts on that in a second. But what that means is with a young quarterback, Isaac Wilson, yes, the younger brother of Zach Wilson, he's getting the call at quarterback. Cam Rising with another season-ending injury. For those keeping that count home, he is eligible for year 8, which is pretty big deal. He was in the same high school class as guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Aiden Hutchinson, class 2018 kid, has technically another year of eligibility next year if he wants it because of the injury. Anyway, they had a rough year up there. Their last few games, they scored 7 points last Saturday against TCU in a loss, 19 against Arizona State in a loss, 10 against Arizona in a loss. They beat Oklahoma State 22-19. They really just were able to pound the rock in that one for 250 yards. And honestly, watching that one live back then, I remember it's not like they did anything tricky. They just lined up and ran straight ahead against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, I would also point out, has not won a conference game yet. So it's not like that's the most daunting of opponents either. They didn't play Oklahoma State's defense did not play very well on top of that. And so you're looking at an offense that has kind of sputtered, right? Because those games are in the opposite order. They had 22 against Oklahoma State, and then they had 10 against Arizona. Then they had 19 against Arizona State. Then they had 7 against TCU, right? That's all bad. The new guy replacing the old guy is Mike Bojakian. He has been on the sideline, it sounds like, for the year that he's been a quarterback coach and helper, analyst type guy. He's been on the sideline with the OC. He's been up in the box. His resume, Bojakian's, the new OCs, is like legitimately full of OC jobs. He's been the OC at Northwestern, Boston College, Tennessee, Cincinnati, and Central Michigan. He's also had stints as quarterback coaches at Tampa Bay and Chicago in the NFL. He's been in some form or fashion of the college or pro ranks since 1998, and he actually spent 2 years as a high school offensive coordinator before that. It's a long resume of OC kind of stuff, and he replaces a guy in Ludwig that, again, stepped down, and very odd for a guy that's been there since 2019 to just step down mid-season. My read, if you want my 2 cents, this is not my reporting, this is my reading between the lines, is after putting up a stinker of 7 points against TCU, he was told in not so many words that this is probably not going to last much longer. And instead of finishing out the season, he just went and called it quits and hung it up. And I don't mean to say that I don't get that. You see it a lot across the board, or you'll say, guys just say, hey, just fire me now then, or whatever, right? But you also, the season spiraled out of control, so it's a little different. The starting quarterback's gone. The guy had connection, Cam Rising and Ludwig Digger, whatever. But there's something about not finishing that I don't like about that. But neither here nor there. It's not my offensive coordinator. He is the one that we're playing against this week, and I guess he would have been the one we're playing against this week. Instead, Houston plays against a Mike Bojakian offense. And I will say, I went and watched some of Northwestern on YouTube on Monday to try and figure out what they did when he was there. A lot of pistol kind of actions. 12 personnel looked like a lot. Sometimes that second tight end is off the ball. Sometimes he's fully on the ball online. Heavy run scheme kind of stuff. Gap scheme, run scheme at that. Folding, twisting, lead blocking. Not a whole lot of more traditional zone, not a whole lot of spread when he was at Northwestern. He ran a handful of different screens and things and kind of, I don't want to call it tricky, but kind of misdirection-y kind of stuff off of that. And all of this is to take, set up play action, double pumps and stuff like that, take shots. At least that's what it was at Northwestern. He had some wildcat kind of stuff too, but they also really talented running back Northwestern. I don't know how he feels like things are going for him at Utah at the moment. Obviously, things are a little bit different because the starting quarterback they thought they were going to have has been out for the season for a while now. But their running back, Micah Bernard, is their highest ranked offensive skill position player on Pro Football Focus. He's a normal size Big 12 running back, 6 foot, 205 pounds. He's had a pretty productive career at Utah. Didn't finish the year last year with an injury, but had 300 or more carries in 3 seasons, had 475 or so his 2022 season. And Utah's been really good while he's been there. On the year this year, because of the quarterback injuries, he's kind of had a lot of the load. Thus far, he's already got 730 yards, only 2 touchdowns, which I think speaks to some of their issues they've been having this season. Utah is one of the few teams that's kind of down near Houston in the scoring this season in the conference play, and that's with Houston being shut out twice, right? And so they're looking at the same kind of year offensively. And so I don't know whether I would read into a spark being jumped with Mike Bojakian, the next guy, and leaning into that run game. We'll talk to JC Wistersill, the Locked On Utes coach, later this week. He'll also be on Big 12 Squad. He's always there. I don't know if this is going to be an improvement for them as much as might be just kind of shift. If I were Bojakian myself, and this is again not reporting, this is what I would do if it were up to me. I would look at this more as a chance to kind of show that you deserve the job, and then spend the offseason trying to get your own guys in there, right, for whatever kind of an offense you want to do. And the way you show you earn the job is by producing. It's hard to imagine them putting in a new offense in less than a week because this has happened since Sunday night. Putting a new offense in less than a week wouldn't be super productive. I imagine finding ways to kind of tune up what they were doing is more going to be what he tries to do. And that would be, again, with those quarterback injuries, a heavy dose of the run game. Isaac Wilson, 54% passer, 7 touchdowns, 8 picks. I guess he's got 1,000 yards through 6 games, but it's not looking great for him. We'll talk more this week about what kind of things that they try to do in that run game, what kind of stuff they try to do with Isaac Wilson. But the question of offensive coordinator at Utah, Oklahoma, Purdue, wherever, has led to people thinking about Houston's offensive coordinator in similar fashion. I want to talk a little bit about Barbay and the offense. Before we get too far, I got to remind you guys about our buddies over at Roy, one of my favorite friends we've got these days at Locked On, because it's time to recognize. Dun, 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 dun. Didn't he give us a dinger for that? Like the noise, maybe? Yeah, listening? Yeah, gotcha. Anyway, it is time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So for this season, we pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits can lead to macro changes, massive changes for these micro deposits. With the Roy app, you can directly support the student athletes you love, ensuring all funds go to the specific player or players you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going. You can even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part is that it's all risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver on the content, you can get your money back. This week, we decided that Mekhi Muse was the player of the week, so we pitched in $100 in Mekhi Muse's NIL account. And I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a big difference. Let's show Muse the love that the school has, the love of the Cougs have for Mekhi Muse. It's going to be big time. Remember, you can pay today and celebrate tomorrow. Support sets up your team for success. Plus, I'm on Roy's exciting giveaway. 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, enter code LOCKED ON, and you're entered. If you're already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign can also get you entered automatically in that contest. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy today. Join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure you check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support players, change the game. Park Ranch for Locked On Coogs. Now, let's stress, Roy really is one of my favorite people we work with as a company. They're doing cool stuff in the NIL space, and I think it's cool for easy apps and easy access for people to get involved in something I think we all need to be involved in to help push the program forward. That's why I'm happy to be getting $100 a week to different Cougs pockets, because it's a money where your mouth is kind of moment. Speaking of money where your mouth is, a lot of people are saying that they're ready to be done with Kevin Barbay. The offense has not been up to snuff. I think people knew it was going to be a rebuilding year for Houston. I don't think people necessarily knew it was going to look like this. Now, I was worried about the offense coming into the year. I did think Donovan would play better, but you also had offensive talent in the transfer portal. Without dissecting every single thing and diagnosing every single problem, a lot of people are ready to move on from Kevin Barb, the offensive coordinator. Now, I will say, much like I've said before, that typically when a team struggles, the first guy people want to get rid of is the coach. The second is the quarterback. Sometimes those flip-flop. And with them having just gotten rid of Dana Holgorsen a year ago, they've benched Donovan Smith this year, because Deion Chris has been hurt, whatever. So it's kind of changed that up some. The next person in line would be the next coach to blame, and that falls to Kevin Barbay. And people are already thinking about making changes. One thing I would stress when you look at these situations, because whenever Purdue firing Graham Harrell, or Oklahoma firing Sean Luttrell, or Ludwig at Utah, as we open the episode with, people seem to think, see, other schools are doing this midseason. Houston needs to do the same, or whatever, to save the program. And those 3 specific instances, admittedly, I paid attention to because Harrell is a Texas high school legend, and then Ludwig, who was in our conference, and Luttrell's guy we coached against as Houston, right? I see them as different. Ludwig at Utah has been there since 2019. Pretty large sample size before cutting cord with him this fall. Also, you cut the cord with him in Utah because you've got Mike Bojakian, a guy that's been a career offensive coordinator, on your staff to replace him. Graham Harrell at Purdue, same kind of thing, was a second-year guy, and they had a former Division I offensive coordinator as an analyst on staff, and they just promoted the guy from analyst OC because he'd been a Division I offensive coordinator before. Sean Luttrell was in his second year at Oklahoma. He was an analyst last year, but Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator at that point, took the head job at Mississippi State, and they promoted the trail. So it's the second year at Oklahoma with multiple former offensive coordinators on staff, and they've just combined them to make a co-offensive coordinator, right? That is to say, they all seem to have some sort of an exit strategy for what came next at the OC spot, all three of those instances. And frankly, time on task, each of those coordinators had been there more than a full year. And I think that you're going to see Barbay get at least into the middle of next season. And frankly, I think a decent program deserves to give the coaches they hire that, right? So Barbay came in, let's work with me here. Barbay came in last January, right? And I do remember at the time, there was talk about would Willie Fritz bring over his staff entirely from Tulane, offensive side included, and there was some pretty heavy hinting in the internet rumor way that things get hinted that the offensive staff was going to be a big part of this, and then they stayed at Tulane. Ultimately, I don't know what the favoritism would or would not have been there, but they did stay at Tulane. That part really did happen, right? Shortly thereafter, Barbay announced he's been at Mississippi State the year before. Then they fired the head coach and cleaned out staff. Before that, he was at Appalachian State. Successful run there, I would argue. And had kind of been at smaller schools before that, right? So Barbay comes in, kind of a quick riser there in terms of moving up the ranks. That's January. Well, signing day, like the later period, I guess, the normal signing day is early February. Can't get a whole lot of kids in at that point, right? Go through spring practice. You're trying to pull in kids maybe in the transfer portal after the fact. And I would look at his offense, say, like, what ended up happening is because of the offensive shift in style, you actually lost guys to transfer portal like the Sam Browns of the world because this wasn't going to be a solid offense that fit them. It's a run-first offense, right? Also, a thing that hurt this offense was that you spent spring practice with what you thought was starting quarterback Donovan Smith not able to throw the football, right? So you gotta have a bunch of mismatched pieces at that point, but you want to draw up an offense that's going to fit Smith. But that means that to get the other 10 guys on offense working in that offense, Zion Chris is the quarterback working on that offense, which is a great theory, except that he kind of, from a toolsy perspective, needs a little bit different offense because he's got different tools. And so then this fall, you get to camp and you think it's Donovan. Donovan's on somewhat of a pitch count kind of thing with the way he's practicing. He's not throwing every day and whatever, right? Anyway, they get to the season. Donovan's just not having that year. He's just not. It's been a bad year. And I like the kid a lot. I thought if he progressed from last year, he'd be pretty good. He regressed. Injury, I think, played a big part in it. In hindsight, I feel bad for the kid, but he's not as good as he was last year. You got Zion instead. Zion needs a different offense than Donovan did. Zion Chris runs a different offense. He should run a different offense. They're different quarterbacks. That means that you spend a lot of time on task, a lot of your hours available to have been spent were spent on a Donovan guy that you didn't get to see throw until the middle of the summer. And so suddenly, like, the offense gets put back. The bigger thing, though, is this recruiting aspect because they've got quarterbacks coming in, right? Whatever you think about Zion Chris finishing out the year, because it does look like he's going to be healthy and ready to go. They're pulling in 2025, so next fall you'll see Austin Carlisle on campus. I don't know if he plays as a true freshman or not. He is tearing it up as in your high school. Go watch some high school highlights of Austin Carlisle. Whew, a lot of fun, right? Keyshawn Henderson, right? The top-ranked athlete in 2026, the number one player in the state of Texas in 2026, is committing to Houston because we've told him he can play quarterback here. And frankly, I think in watching him, why can't he? I think it might be the kind of thing where he plays like receiver his freshman year and quarterback his sophomore or something, like a later transition because he's just too good an athlete to not have on the field. But that's all logistics. Whatever the case may be, those are your quarterbacks of the future, both Austin and Keyshawn, and they're not on campus yet. And you hired a guy on Barbay to run an offense. They went out and recruited quarterbacks that fit that offense or fit the dream of one Barbay. If you fire him before they get here, before you even get to see what the mesh of the two could look like, I feel like that's shooting yourself in the foot, starting all over again. Further, it shows sure shows a lack of conviction on what you made in the first hire, and second, I think it focuses on a couple of key problems this year that may have been holdover problems from the last guy. Right now, all that is to say that I think Barbay gets at least through the middle of next season to show improvement progress. If that's with Zion Chris at starting quarterback, that's with Austin Carlisle at starting quarterback. Shoot, if that's with Parker Jenkins at starting quarterback, or whatever the case may be, right? Whoever it is, I think you give him that because, okay, you had a full year, a full recruiting cycle, transfer portal included, etc. You theoretically, knock on wood, are going to go through a full spring healthy. What does it look like in October, November of 2025? Then if you get to the end of the season 2025 and it's not good, or if you're midway through and it looks awful, I can see why things would happen. There have been questionable things. There are times where it looks like receivers and quarterbacks are not on the right page. There have been times where I don't know why we're running the ball on 3rd and long and it's not even a draw. There have been times where I feel like we're running things that we've seen not work against that defensive alignment. I get those complaints. I really do. I don't mean to discredit them. I don't mean to say you're not right to be upset about them. I'm just saying that realistically, logically, the guy gets another 12 months. It would be a big panic move to not do that. And I don't think we want a program, anyone wants a program that just makes panic moves, no matter how much more fun they are to tweet about. Anyway, the offense has had a lot of trouble this year, and so I understand the frustrations. It takes a lot to get a good offense these days. I want to talk something about a basketball tweet conversation, kind of an IG Live conversation from Isaiah Harwell in a second. Talk more about what that could mean for the Houston Cougar basketball future and the brighter side of things in a moment. But first, we mentioned today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because it made its way to become the #1 sports book. Because right now, when it's in the middle of a game, you can check out things like the latest stats, live play-by-play, and all kinds of other things while you're on the page making your bet. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet down at FanDuel.com. Honestly, if you're on FanDuel, checking out FanDuel, looking at the Houston and Utah game, I don't even care what the number is. Hammer that under. Both of these defenses are strong. Both of these offenses have struggled. This will be a low-scoring football game. So hammer the under in Houston and Utah. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Parker Reins for Locked On Cougs here, talking about Houston Cougar football and transitioning into Houston Cougar basketball, because Isaiah Harwell let out some interesting, let's just say, hunches, and I like where his head is at, and I like hunches. So Isaiah Harwell, if you've forgotten, we talked about on the show before, but you might not listen. If so, go back and check it out. Is the 5-star shooting guard in class of 2025, 5-star plus, I should say, meaning that he is actually an NBA-rated caliber player. Probably a one and done. We'll see. Anyway, at a Wasatch Academy. I guess actually at a Pocatello, Idaho, I should say, backing it up. He committed to Houston earlier this cycle. He's the #1 shooting guard in America. Like I said, he's a top 10 player. The order kind of gets wonky, but he is a top 10, top 5 on a lot of consensus that he's a top 5 player with a couple people in the top 10, I should say, in America. Really, really talented shooter, long range defender, aggressive defender, fits into Houston well. On IG Live, he dropped some hints that he may not be as a top 5 player in America. He thinks he might not be the highest ranked recruit coming to Houston next year. There are some pretty highly ranked guys out there that have not committed, and that led to people going a little bit in a happy way, crazy on the internet, talking about what things are. Now, I will say this much. Harwell did not say he had information, and he clarified on Twitter that he does not have information on kids joining him. He just knows the 2025 class is going to be special. I, in my own retweet, said that it's probably going to be special because he's in it, right? Whoever comes along to make it great. We know Bryce Jackson's coming along, right? But he just has a feeling in talking to guys, and the high school kids talk to one another. And I know teacher and coach. I coach high school kids. None of that are Kelvin Sampson caliber athletes yet. But anyway, but here's what I will say is I don't think you can overestimate how often these kids talk to one another, even across the country, right? And it happens in the transfer portal window too. Kids recruiting kids like, hey, man, you should come join and play with me. We're getting this kind of NIL deal here. We're getting this kind of this here. The facilities are great. The girls are cool. The food's awesome, whatever, right? They're recruiting each other that way, right? That's happening at the high school level as well. And if we're being blunt about it, has always happened. And what I'm getting here between national AU circuits and things like that is that Harwell has probably run into some of these guys and knows them at least in a texting well or a DMing well kind of sense. And he feels strongly after conversations that some of these guys are coming. And I haven't had confirmation since the weekend, but like going into the weekend, I'd heard that Kingston Fleming, who was down to Houston and Texas Tech and Arkansas, had actually canceled his Arkansas visit, right? It was a rumor last week. There were no pictures of him being at Arkansas over the weekend. Kingston Fleming is the number one player in Texas and the top point guard in America. That would be the kind of guys that Harwell's talking about. He's down to Tech and Houston on most outlets reporting that right now. I think there is. He's from San Antonio because Houston's closer, but neither one is exactly hometown. A lot of reasons I think he fits into Houston, but I digress. Cole Pete is a big-time perimeter forward, big NBA-ready body that can already do guard-like things. He is down to a handful of schools that include Houston as well, and he's from out west, Arizona. And for what it's worth, I think he'd fit into the Houston culture very well. Is he going to fly across the country to do it? Family is important to him. Can he bring his family back and forth? That probably requires NIL money. And if it requires NIL money, what's the NIL package look like? Anyway, I digress, right? I also know like Chris Sinak, right? Big man. Louisiana has Houston high on his radar. He did take that visit to Arkansas last weekend, right? What kind of NIL package do they want? I know Sinak was a fast riser, not unlike Jacob McFarland a year ago. Sinak's a crazy athlete, crazy high motor. John Clark, kind of the same thing, had a couple of crazy AAU summers, and everyone's like, oh my God, this kid can really play for a 6'8" big body, right? Long arms. He's at Link Academy right now. He's got Houston high on his list, and he's originally from Houston as well. You have all these different pieces of like, who could Isaiah be talking about? And we've been talking about class 2025 for a long time because while they've actually got eyes set on some pretty great 2026s and 7s as well, because that's the name of the game is you can't stop recruiting. AB or always be recruit, or ABC is always be recruiting, right? I feel like we're kind of narrowing down who Isaiah Harwell is talking about in the 2025 class. I'm excited about it. I think it's exciting. I think it's really exciting because it feels like Harwell is texting or DMing or whatever one of the guys. And again, this also could be them just shooting the breeze, and that's a good thing, and da-da-da, and then something else happens. I feel fairly confident that whatever the 2025 class looks like, it's got Bryce Jackson and Isaiah Harwell in it, will be all right. I just do. But fascinating way to look at some insight into what's coming in 2025. I keep hearing that things are coming soon and then nothing's happening. But to be fair, it's not bad news either. It's not like guys are committing elsewhere. So we'll see where things are headed. Obviously, as soon as something breaks, we'll be breaking it here at Locked On Cougs, daily podcast on all things Houston Cougars. Thanks for making us your first listen. Like and subscribe to get us each and every day. Look for our second listen of the day. Go check out Locked On Big 12. Drake does a great job breaking down the entire conference bit by bit. He's an entertaining guy, to say the least. He's also in charge of the Big 12 squad, and where we get that together. Locked On Cougs Premier, Locked On Podcast. I'm in your team every single day. Go Cougs.